All right. So I'm back on the mic. So that took a little bit of a technical difficulty. So I have a little juice right now for this. So even though it's kind of a different time, I think it's like almost 5 o'clock on a Friday. I decided to come on and do a little bit more reading. It's like looking at right now, we're at 170, page 170. And so we're more than halfway through. And yeah, I was thinking about this, and uh, and I was thinking about how, I mean, when I'm done doing this, something else will arise out of this. But anyway, so the topic for today, and I will, one thing I want to just be like, I'm trying to be really transparent to a point that is like also respectful of my own self and like process and stuff, is that I am doing this. So and I have been practicing this. I am doing it right now, and that yeah, it's really an interesting process. And I think I look forward, I've been I get notes, even though I'm actually kind of, for this summer, I've been kind of leaning back into my own process and deepening my own understanding of TPM, and sort of like um really really accepting and understanding that kind of the next move will come through in the way that it's supposed to, and trusting that, which at times is more challenging than others. But that part of my capability as a person who brings this into the world is directly related to my own practice with this. And so as far as my responsibility, instead of feeling the impetus to like invest a lot of time in right now in how to disseminate and like sort of like teach or whatever this, I'm going kind of back in. And I can see why. I mean, one thing about when I used to teach the classes like 4 years ago, I think about how my understanding of the potency of this was something that was borderline negligent in terms of some of the practices that I was leading with people. Um, yeah. So part of my way of understanding this is it does involve right now, like, other folks that are in this, and learning from them, and working with people, and but a lot of it is about this direct experience. And right now, one of the things that I'm really, in terms of releasing the tangle, are very fourth hub things that are related even to my responsibility as a teacher of this. Yeah. In terms of my own needs, and my own needs that relate to connection and belonging. And so, as a leader in my, past iterations, one of the things has been seeing my emotional needs playing out as they do with folks. And so right now, what I work on has to do with like my own connection to my own belonging to myself, and like the softening and dissolving the need to have like practitioners who will come with us, like provide belonging for me and connection in ways that are like very validating for me. And also my relationship with who I am in my own process relative to what this is as its own sort of separate entity. So that's something that's arising right now that is related to being a responsible steward of this work. Because this stuff, it's like, if it is not the self-awareness, if it is not where it needs to be, this can, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it for now on that. So conditional love and acceptance. And the reminder that we're in the interruptions and stressors. So there's a very specific angle, or perspective that we're taking with with the notion of conditional love and acceptance as we're talking about it as an interruption. And that very specifically, once again, I haven't read it, so there's a very good chance I'm repeating something I'm about to read. But the notion of unconditional love and acceptance is that as children, without context, without experience, our nervous system is actually being built to accommodate the experiences that we're having and our growth as as human beings, is that there's just an appropriateness for the way accountability is handled and responsibility is handled, that is, if we're not in an environment that is able to offer us this level of sort of compassion and understanding and awareness, we may not fulfill the need to feel this foundationally. And as a result, the expectation is that we could find it as adults. So a lot of stuff, as previously mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that we look for as adults that we didn't get as children, and we're looking for it from other people. And unfortunately, the window for that to be possible and even appropriate has kind of closed. And now, and this is where this work really comes in, which is working on how do we find this type of relationship with ourself? How do we find this relationship with ourself? Because expecting unconditional love, and this means just being loved and accepted without condition. It's kind of in as far as a fourth hub thing. And even so there's a lot of definitions in this that are necessary. One of them is what love is in this context, which is love is showing up for yourself consistently every day. And that there's a reciprocal give and take. So the heart, breathing, there's a inhale, exhale, give, take, natural rhythm and cycle between the things we're in relationship with. And so, the notion of unconditional love for adults, we do need to be in relationship. We do need to be showing up. We do need to be accountable. We do need to take responsibility. So if someone, the idea that just you can kind of be whatever you are and be accepted, just completely for that, So, I mean, so some of that is so some of it, I think, also just has to do with the amount of distance, proximity, boundary. Because if you have so for example, if you have a friend who is highly emotionally dysregulated, and every situation winds up being something happens that winds up being kind of something explosive that absorbs all the energy, and it's just repeated It's like and even, like, discussions about, like, "Hey, here's a thing. This isn't, like, great for me. This is hard for me, this stuff that you'd be willing to work on." And whether if there it's, like, denial, or just, like, an inability or willingness to take responsibility for being a person that brings just kind of a consistent level of chaos into your life. This idea of unconditional love, that what we should do is like stay in conditions that are really bad for us, like drain our emotional nervous system capacity consistently. You can love somebody from a distance, right? So maybe that's the unconditionalness of it, is still loving them. But um, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that's part of the thing of not vilifying the person, you know, but not vilifying them, but the loving ourselves first, where it's making the decision about our own peace, you know, our own happiness, our own joy, like protecting ourselves like we matter, protecting yourself like you are important. Um, so, okay, we'll read this. We'll see what comes up out of it. All right. So, once again, we're talking about this as an interrupting factor, and we're talking about this happening in the developmental stage of the hub, not as adults. So, as an interrupting factor that impacts the development or the adaptation in the given hub. So, here we go. All right. So, the experience of being entirely loved as a child becomes embodied in the adult. As children, having at least one person consistently see us as delightful, important, and interesting can shape the relationship we have with ourselves and even change the way we experience our lives. So, one thing I just want to encourage, just taking a pressing pause on this right now, is to take a moment and think back to the people. And if they're your parents, fantastic. But in addition to that, who are the people that in your life you can remember who made you feel that way, who were able to be really present with you and pay attention to you and see things in you and point them out and delight in you? Because to have this person as a grandparent is terrific, but to have it in a parent is sublime. And to have more than one person is a great fortune. But even with adoration at home, we must face the outside world. The idyllic version of childhood friendship and joy we remember often crowds out some of the more sinister experiences of early socialization. Kids can be mean, teasing, and labeling others as weirdos and punishing different kids through exclusion and or bullying. Experiencing early child on child bigotry, misogyny, and or gender binarism first time I've probably ever said that out loud, is hurtful to an open-hearted child. Kids tell jokes to get laughs with the shock of cruelty added for effect. The playground can be a place of joy and freedom, but it can also be a petri dish of children experimenting with the power of being mean. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's, like, really important here to remember that children just are, like, they're not, and I think Gabor Mate, I don't know if that's in here, he writes about this, I think in the chapter 6, there's a little bit of an allusion to this. I think he wrote an entire book about, like, children kind of raising themselves or being raised by peers rather than their, parents. And part of this is the kids are working with very limited context and information. So it might be like things they've seen on TV, at home, ideas or like older siblings have given them, you know? I mean, just even in these like sort of like lawless lands that, of, the back of a school bus or, sleepover or even camp or these like gaggles of children that form is that there's usually like a sense that like, maybe some kid knows a little more or has more confidence or is a little bit scarier, and just remembering like that was a kid, and like and just because like we're going into these early relationships like not understanding that these are just other kids, and the idea that maybe like their older brother told them something. It's their older brother, older sis like just realizing the layers, like, and I think unpeeling this is really helpful and painful, you know, thinking about that little version of yourself that was just so innocent and so wanting for like connection and belonging and finding people exciting. You remember that? Like you meet new kids and it's like, wow, like, oh my gosh, like they're doing something like you've never seen before. They like tell you about something cool. I mean, it's not all negative. You're getting exposed to all sorts of different inputs. So it's like, and blessed and lucky are the folks who got primarily positive ones. I don't know if that's actually a thing that totally happens. But you know, yeah. I mean, even stuff like, where the parental influence with like mean teasing, like I grew up in a area where people like did a lot of stuff about like money, like you're poor was like a thing, and everybody was poor. Everybody was poor. Like, and so that was like a big thing, and of course that must have been learned from parents. So, yeah. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to dip back in here from the petri dish of children experimenting with being mean. And Luke just went and sat in his little bed that he hasn't sat in a while. So that's kind of amazing. Anyhow, back to the reading. Early in life, we hide our or obscure parts of ourselves depending on the conditions of acceptance and belonging that that are presented to us. So early in life, we obscure parts of ourselves depending on the conditions of acceptance and belonging that are presented to us. Yeah. I mean, you see, like I have memories of people who, you had people that were, it was always like, what makes somebody popular? Well, it was like sort of a naturally emanating confidence. Usually like there's some, prettiness or handsomeness and whatever that probably contributed to it, but ultimately that there was like this sense of self, like this kind of confidence, you know, and sensibility. And, and I think one of the things is like it was interesting because like I can think back to folks who were really like wanted to be popular so that they'd like affect, they'd like wear the clothing they'd try to act a certain way, and it, like, always was, like, you could sense just from an integrity standpoint that it was, like, a put on, that was, like and I remember even some kids, like, getting the sense that their parents wanted them to be popular, and I know that in the small town I was from, there was some, like, networks of adults that probably wanted to, like, encourage that for socialization, it's like that their kids like, I experienced a little bit of that, um, and revolted against it. There's that too. God. So, but yeah, I mean, just look at this. I mean, you think about like all of these dynamics and whichever like resonates of realizing that the thing is that this hunger for connection and belonging and so if you were already coming out of a home life where there wasn't an extraordinary like foundation of feeling secure and belonging in your human connections, that the social ones even yeah yeah, the social ones will take on a spectrum of different um like like reconciliation, like a way to kind of like solve. I had a repeating pattern of having a best friend, and then she would disappoint me somehow, and that would reenact or like activate some sense of like abandonment in me. And and that would like sort of surface rage. So I would repeatedly and then I'd like act out on them. I'd do something really mean. But that was, related to my own foundation not being particularly strong. And because I didn't know that was at play, I mean, it took me a long time to know that, that like how my foundation was different than other people's. Um, for me to not look at that as to say like, oh, that's evidence that I'm, sort of a demon. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. It's just like acting out this kind of deep hurt. All right. So it's like 22 minutes. Oh my God. Okay. Let's keep on rolling. So if we were not taught to love in the home, as adults, we become even more desperate for love and approval and become vulnerable to counterfeit representations of it. This can be parasitic, ranging from narcissistic patterns to cult like abuse practices and groups. So read it like so reading that again. So early in life we hide or obscure parts of ourselves depending on the conditions of acceptance and belonging that are presented to us. If we were not taught to love in the home as adults, we become even more desperate for love and approval and become vulnerable to counterfeit representations of it. This can be parasitic, ranging from narcissistic patterns to cult-like abuse practices and groups. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that like I think the thing is like to have that foundational sense of somebody being able to be incredibly responsive and knowledgeable and like wise. Mm, yeah, I think that's a thing. All right. I think it's a thing. I think it's a thing. I don't know. You tell me. Okay. Yeah. So if we didn't have the safety to ask questions and to speak our mind, or We're indoctrinated with racist, misogynist, and/or anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric. The programming below our consciousness becomes part of the rejected self. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Yeah, we are subconsciously aware that we're not fully loved when certain versions of being human are unacceptable to the people we love the most. Uh-oh. Knowing that there are conditions required for belonging to our family creates an impossible choice for a young child. Either believe and belong or face exile. Of course, for people who experience persecution and prejudice, the question of how much to hide to be culturally and socially accepted is impossible to gauge if there's something that cannot be hidden that affects social acceptance. Gee, I wonder what I'm talking about there. To be mature and developed in this hub, we must have tolerance, curiosity, and compassion for the lived experiences of people who are different from us. Yep. That's the beginning of something that's going to continue to we're gonna continue to build on. We don't need to understand another's lifestyle to view it as valid. So, admittedly, this is a little, this has like dog whistle qualities to it, which is pointing to, um, families that bond. It's kind of like tribal. It's like being bonded more by what you are not than what you actually are. I mean, yeah. Yeah, and in families, you see these families that have, like, really nothing to connect over except these, like, high in there, there's, like, a lot of, like, very low emotional capacity, extraordinary low emotional capacity. You see this in the lack of feeling, you see this in a lack of physical mobility. Watch the rigidity in the body. You see these qualities. Yeah, and oh, sorry, minor interruption. And so the thing is that what happens and just notice, like, look around and see if you notice this in areas of your life. Like, see if this is something that you can observe, yourself, which is seeing certain families that unite over, like, very highly charged things like politics, and where it's like like, even groups of people in any form that, like, unite in a sense of, like, shared agreement about something that is, like, exclusionary or inflamed, like an inflamed belief system that if you are to disagree with it, you are risking exile. It's in or you're in or you're out. Very deep. This harks back to the, second hub. You either agree with, the suite of beliefs that are, the in-group versus out-group. So and the other thing too is that if you are part of a family who has or, I'll stick with family right now, but it also leans into culture where they're really like binary, highly defined gender roles, um, racist beliefs. You'll mostly know whether you like kind of your level of physical comfort. Um, and the knowledge that if you are to stray from them, if you were to act outside of those gender roles, if you are to openly express dissent against the like rhetoric, or even just that would actually cost you positive regard in a very deep and important way. So for you to express something that could be an idea or something, a growing knowledge or self-awareness that you've brought in from outside the in-group, that is going to cost you your belonging. These are very interrupting things. And I've got to say that for anyone who is in a family where you see, I'll use racism, very much like this idea of dehumanization, is that as soon as there's the notion that it's like, wow, if I were this, I would be an other. And there's something deep in our integrity and our humanity that knows that this isn't true. And so there's this sense of like the fear of the loss of the belonging and the connection to the people that we know as being love. So it's kind of like, what parts of yourself do you have to shut down in order to be able to be like remain loved? So when you see that belonging that's created by folks who are like the hunger, it's hunger. Yeah. So, right. Okay. Okay, that's it. We did it. We made it through. And we made it through with the my glam squad wasn't my glam squad wasn't in the building for this one, so yeah, you get a refund. So of your ticket price. So anyway, I'm sending you a lot of love and appreciation, and any interaction with this, any feedback. I welcome any feedback I have on this, or you can offer on this, anything that you have as far as like, I mean, it doesn't mean that right now you're going to watch the next video and I've incorporated it. I mean, that's something that's actually kind of unlikely, because right now I'm just really following the flow of this. But with that said, where this will evolve into, it's really useful for me to hear what you'd like to see, what would make this better, easier for you, and being really open about it. Like whatever your idea is, I want to hear it. And whether you're putting it in the comments, whether you're reaching out to me directly, yeah, I'm open. I'm not offended if you're, 'cause folks have like the very common, very common feedback is about the production quality of these. And, yeah, I'm not going to be changing that, at least in this like next like cycle with this. This is kind of how this is arising. And but it will change, or it may very well, like I'll say, I won't like commit. I'll say it seems like a high likelihood that it will change. But right now the most important thing for me is that it's really the content, and sound is important, and of course sound is important. So we've got the microphone here, and like visual is relatively important, but the production of it well, like, at some point, I can see there being a good reason to, like, do some cutting and trimming, but right now, this is how this is. But so with that said with that said, I really do wanna hear, um, from you. I wanna hear what you'd like to see, what would help you in your process. And I'm mostly interested in hearing from folks who are telling me things that would help them get more into the practice, help them be more engaged, help them things that are kinda like watching it and being like like watching a couple and saying like, "Oh, this, that, the other thing." There's like infinity in terms of like how to make something perfect. Like that like any direction in terms of perfection that I'm moving into is about people that intend to engage in this practice, not necessarily like to make this, kind of like glossy and beautiful. It's really about, like, the how this connects with people who yeah, who are in this. Yeah. So, anyway, thank you, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.